the talks are on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, so you don't get to miss anything. Hopefully you're in our Facebook group, which is the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Keeps you connected. If you got any events that are going on or workshops or anything like that, please post it in there, and it'll keep you informed of what's going on, probably in the tri-state areas. Some Zoom meetings to fill in your program in case you're on the run somewhere. We got a treat for you tonight. I think we got the best chairperson of all of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. Please welcome Carol. She's going to come up here and
welcome everybody. My name's Kara and I am an alcoholic. So good to see all of y'all. I hope everybody had a wonderful week. I know I did. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street, Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m. and speaker at 8:30 p.m. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome anyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce himself? Please raise your first hand.
I'm Joey, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi Joey, welcome.
Hi, I'm Brett, alcoholic.
Hi Brett, welcome.
I'm Rick, alcoholic.
Welcome. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and willing to sponsor, please raise your hand. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. just up the street at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street, Doylestown. Coffee is at 6:15. And there's another really good meeting here at Mondays at 6 p.m. It's our STEP meeting, so we'd like to, all are welcome. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purpose of big book CDs to help those who can't afford them, please put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Books and CD donations, and CDs available free of no charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, PA, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there. Join our Facebook page to keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. Now I would like to introduce Nick to come up and read the AA preamble. Let's give Nick a warm welcome.
My name's Nick, I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. They may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I have Brian to come up and read the Just for Today prayer.
Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Brian and I am an alcoholic. Just for today, a prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can. Dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. With that, I'm going to have Jack come up here. He's going to read the 12 steps to recovery.
How you doing? My name's Jack. I'm an alcoholic. These are the 12 steps. 1, we admitted we are powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs.
The 7th tradition states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover food, rent, big book CDs, events, and workshops. And with your donations, we were able to donate over 200 big books to local rehabs in the area. So every bit helps. Thank you so much. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, the most important part of the meeting, I'd like to introduce a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Let's give Jenica S from New Jersey a warm welcome. Woo!
Hi, I'm Jenica. I'm an alcoholic. I was sitting here listening to you guys go through all of your announcements, and I was trying to figure out when I was new if this was a meeting I would have come to. And I say that because I looked for meetings with good snacks in the beginning. I did. I went where the snacks were. And it was probably because I didn't think I had alcoholism, and I didn't know if I really belonged here. But people in AA were nice to me. And there weren't a lot of people left talking to me or nice to me when I showed up. So I went where there were snacks and people were nice. But you guys are really enthusiastic. And now, years later, I can really appreciate that, but I think I also would have probably been terrified to walk in. And so just the particulars, my sober date is October 18th, 2003. And so I've been sober about a little over 19 years. And it baffles me to say that because I have been sober basically almost half my life. I got sober at 22 years old, and I only drank for 6 years. But I will tell you that my alcoholism became more obvious in sobriety to me. It was probably obvious to everyone around me the entire time I was out there drinking, but it wasn't until I was coming regularly to AA and seeing my life from the vantage point of not through a drunken haze that I started to understand alcoholism. And as one of my favorite speakers says, I caught alcoholism here. I mean, I was an alcoholic, I just didn't know it. And I didn't identify with alcoholism until I came here. And that's really important for me because if you had met me when I walked in, I would have told you not only was I not one of you, but I'm a psych major in college, so I could probably treat all of you. And there's no ego at all. So I'll give you a little bit of the background of how I showed up at my first AA meeting at 22 years old. I will tell you, I am so grateful to be asked to speak tonight. So thank you so much for asking me to come down here. I don't get to do this very much anymore. My husband came and spoke to you guys back in August. And it's nice not to be known as Neil's wife, which happens more frequently up by us, even though I've been sober longer. But I'm also grateful. I have 12-week-old twin boys at home and a 4-and-a-half-year-old son. And this 6-hour stretch of driving down here speaking and driving back is the longest I have been without someone asking me to listen to truck tunes in a really long time. So there's a lot of gratitude, and just the fact that I get to be a sober mom today, which is a really amazing experience. Infuriating and amazing all at the same time. So my first drink happened when I was 16, and my last drink was when I was 22. And I am really grateful that it was that quick, because I don't know what would have happened had I stayed out there any longer. And I think about Bill when he talks about like the I had arrived moment, and I think about my first drink, and it's amazing that 19 years later I can still have this very sparkly vision of what that night looked like. The reality was not so sparkly, but my version of it was very sparkly. And I drank the first night the way I drank the last night. I was a binge drinker. I would drink a lot really fast on a pretty empty stomach and black out. And I would think that I was like the life of the party and that it was amazing and everyone wanted to talk to me and the guy was on my arm that I liked and all this good stuff. And, you know, fast forward an hour or two and I'm puking and I'm disappearing and people have to find me, and I get home, and at 16, you know, I wake my parents up because I'm not a stealthy drunk either. I like lose shoes, and I don't hide it well. It's probably also why I got here at 22, because I really don't hide it well. And my mom the next day, she's so funny. She's like, we're not going to tell your dad, but you're going to come shopping with me all day long. And I hung out with guys. I was not like into shopping and makeup and all those things. So there was nothing more torturous than spending an entire day at the mall hungover with my mother. I only had 2 hangovers though, my first drink and my last drink, which just fueled the fact that I could not be alcoholic, because I would wake up the next day and everything would feel fine. And I would just go back to normal life, and I didn't drink all that much. In high school, I was a really good athlete, and I was really smart, and I think that kept me in bounds until I got to college, where the rails really came off. But it didn't matter if I was drinking or not. What I now come to understand is that how I functioned even before I picked up that first drink really was in a way of trying to control everything around me, that I was actually incredibly anxious and didn't know it. I was a perfectionist, am still a perfectionist, a bit of a control freak, and at the end of the day, I was actually quite terrified of feeling anything. And so I would do anything and everything to get out of feeling. And so once alcohol was introduced, it was a really lovely way to check out from the noise between my ears and all the feelings of, are you gonna like me? You know, I said to my husband, I was getting ready to leave, and I said to him, you know, this weird thing happens when I get asked to speak at a meeting, particularly a meeting like this where there's a podium and there's a microphone and there's a recording device, which is that my like ego is like, I've been chosen. You know, I made the cut. And then almost immediately after that is the like, is there a gong and a hook that like 15 minutes in, they're gonna bang it and be like, nope, her sobriety is not up to snuff, and pull me off the stage. And I think I literally operated that way my whole life. You know, I had this air that it was so important that you like me. I worked really hard to impress a lot of people that I didn't know, and many of them that I didn't like, because it was much more important what you thought of me than what I thought of myself. In fact, I don't even think I ever considered that I was allowed to have a thought about myself, because everything outside was so important. And as a result of that, I worked really hard to make it look really good. If you opened a newspaper when I was in high school, you would have seen my name. I was a really good runner. And if you talked to my teachers, they would tell you that I was a lovely student to be around. If you talk to my mother, it's quite a different story about what would happen at home. But I really operated in a way that my outsides and my insides didn't match. And I didn't really actually know that that was problematic. So when I found alcohol, it was really nice, because what it did is it shut off everything that was happening in my head. The committee, that I like to call it, that sometimes decides that it needs to take charge again. It's like the CEO that I didn't appoint in my brain, who wants to make really bad decisions. And I can make them in sobriety, is what I've learned. But that first night, I thought it was awesome. and I wanted to do it again. But I always wanted to be somewhere else doing something else with someone else. And so I really never felt like where I was where I was supposed to be, and I always thought there was something better. And it was almost like I had FOMO before they had a term for it, which was just that like I never thought that I was in the right place. It was never enough. And I did that with everything. So before my drinking really took off and became problematic, I had a really difficult relationship with food that landed me in a hospital and a treatment center and needing to convince everybody that I was perfectly fine and not really trying to kill myself by starving to death. And I was really good at doing that. So things would be really good. They'd kind of epically fall apart. I'd put it back together and make it look really good again. And this is sort of the story of my entire drinking career. And I would do it with everything, with grades, with food, with relationships, with alcohol, you name it. I could pull it together, but I could only do it for so long before it would fall apart again. So when I got to college, they put me in an all-girls substance-free dorm because I was an athlete, and that's where the other female athletes were. And when I was in high school, I had 7 best guy friends, and I didn't like women. And so if you're a woman who comes into AA and you don't like women, stick around. It may take a while, but you'll come to find out, if you're like me, that actually one of the greatest gifts that AA and God gave me was the relationships with women in my life today. But that took a long time. So obviously, a dorm room with 2 other female roommates where it's all women on the floor and you're not allowed to drink was not my idea of college. And I couldn't have predicted it, but I guess we could have. That like within 2 months, they basically mutinied against me and wanted me out because I was difficult and I was not following the rules and I wasn't really easy to live with. And so I moved into another dorm with another girl, and that's sort of the story, right? I was always moving from one group to the next because you'd like me until you didn't like me anymore, because it just got too hard. I'm a really nice person, but in my active alcoholism, I am really difficult to be around. It's like pressing on a bruise that hurts too much. And that's the truth. That was for my family too. At some point, they just said, like, this is just too much. It hurts too much. And so I would do well, and it would look good, and they'd make me an RA, and then I'd get a DWI. And then I'd do well, and they'd offer me a summer fellowship, and I wouldn't show up for class for a week and wouldn't get out of bed except to drink. And, I was really good at pulling it down in a series of sprees, like the book talks about, build it up, pull it right down. And I really didn't think that alcohol was like a threat in it. I mean, I was so delusional that I was willing to, I saw a lot of therapists and they sent me to a lot of psychiatrists and they tried me on a lot of different meds, and I don't even know what the 18-year-old version of my report would be from one of them, how many diagnoses would be there. But I'd be shocked if alcoholism was there because I never talked about it. Because I really didn't think it was the problem. I thought I had all these other issues and I wanted to blame my mom and all this other stuff. And after the DWI, I came home from school and they sent me to a therapist. And he said, well, should we talk about your drinking? And I was like, no, why would we talk about that? That's not a problem. And he's like, oh, okay. And I did not go back to that therapist. And I would not tell you that it was because I thought he was right. In fact, it was because I thought he was wrong. And how could he help me if he's got this crazy thought that maybe my drinking has something to do with this? But the last night that I drank, I was back at college. My friends had all graduated the year before, and they were coming back for homecoming. And so I worked all day, and I met them out that night. And, the thing that I always did, which was that I took a few drinks, and then I don't know what happened. That's my story. And then this time, which was rare, I woke up in a hospital bed, which wasn't typical for me. It had never happened before. And there I am in my hospital gown with EKG leads all over me. And I can't figure out how I got there. And I have a splitting headache. And this is the alcoholic delusion, right? I'm not like, oh, what happened? This is bad. This is so dangerous. What? None of that. All I'm worried about is what did you do with my 7 jeans? I'd worked really hard. It was the summer of 2003. 7 jeans were really in. They were expensive. I had worked really hard. And if someone cut them off, I was going to kill them. And that is literally the only thought that was in my head as I'm laying in this hospital bed. And like I see someone chuckling, but it's such an alcoholic thought, right? Like, it doesn't matter why I'm here, or what happened, or like what's going to happen when I try to go back to my dorm, and am I going to be able to stay in school again? No, where is like the $150 pair of jeans that I bought and was wearing that I loved? Don't take them from me. And so I got home, and we had to locate my car and my keys and all the things that were very typical of what happened when I drank. And someone told me that I had thrown up on a police officer, and it wasn't good. That was sort of it. It wasn't good. My blood alcohol level was pretty high. And I called my mom that day, and I said to her, like, I think they're going to kick me out of school. And like, it's amazing my mom didn't use a lot of expletives in her reaction to me because it's like, well, of course they are. And she didn't say any of that, though. She just said, maybe you should go to an AA meeting. Now, I haven't talked to you a lot about my family or how I grew up, because I didn't grow up in an alcoholic home. I grew up in what one might say was a fairly functional looking home. Things looked really good. But, behind the scenes, there's always stuff. And in my family, the stuff was, we don't talk about stuff. We just don't talk about stuff. We don't talk about it. We don't deal with it. And my mom will tell you that I was the most amazing, perfect little child. I have a 4.5-year-old. There is no such thing as an amazing, perfect 4.5-year-old. So the fact that that is her memory of how I was says quite a bit about my family. My son is wonderful, but oh my goodness. Irrational, unreasonable. I feel like sometimes I'm talking to a drunk. But he's 4.5 and he's not drunk. He's just being a 4.5-year-old. And so when she said, maybe you should go to a meeting, I think like I didn't have words to respond to that, because it was so outside the realm, right? I'd been in an inpatient eating disorder program. I've been in an outpatient eating disorder program. I've been seeing psychiatrists and therapists, and I'm willing to accept all of that. I have a litany of mental health diagnoses. That was me at 22. Give me whatever medication you think I need. It's fine. We'll talk about and analyze why my family made me this way or whatever it was. But alcohol, no, that's not the problem. And, God stepped in that day. God stepped into my life a lot in early sobriety, and I didn't know it until I stuck around long enough to start to see it. Because God stepped in my willingness in a way I had no idea where it came from, and I can't explain it. And if it had been any other day and any other minute, I might have had a really smart remark to my mom and hung up the phone and just gone back to doing what I was doing. But in that moment, I listened to her, and I never listened to her. So I did something that I now understand to be the way service works in AA, which was I called intergroup. And it was a Sunday, so I didn't get like the main office. I got one of us who was on the phone, and they directed me to a meeting. And so I got dressed up, because I don't know what an alcoholic looks like, but I sure wasn't going to show up looking like what I thought an alcoholic would look like. So I'm all dressed up, and I'm standing outside this meeting, and I'm 22 years old. And God's funny, he has a young woman, like an older woman, walk out and like just look at me and say, "You're new." And like there wasn't even like "Are you new?" It was just, "You're new." And like if you've been around, like you know the look. You stick around long enough, you know the newcomer look. And I didn't understand how she knew, but now I know, because in some way, shape, or form, it's terrifying to stand outside a meeting and try to walk in here. And if you're new or you're just walking in, like, you did the hardest part already, actually. Well, you did one of the hardest parts. There's a few other hard parts in the beginning, but you did one of the hardest parts, which was that you actually got in the door. And a lot of people never do that. And as somebody who works in a field who sees it, I can tell you a lot of people never do that. They never make it as far as to put their butt in a seat. And so she ushered me in. She did not say, "You're new, go there." She literally like took my hand, put me at a table, got me a cup of coffee, and handed me a big book. And the significance of that was lost on me for a few years, actually. I didn't really understand what she had done or how she had held her hand out with the promise of AA, just in that, and I had no idea. And I hope one day these doors are open for my sons if they need it, and that somebody does that for them. And it's one of the reasons 19 years in I'm still here, because I have a responsibility also. And I've been back to that particular meeting, and they don't say the serenity prayer at the end, they say the I am responsible prayer. And that does not feel like a coincidence, actually, when I think about what that woman did for me. And so I sat through that meeting. I judged everyone. I decided I had more teeth than all of them combined. I was actually in central Pennsylvania where I went to school. I was inaccurate in that assessment, but at 22, this is where my brain was, and I thought I was smarter than all of you. I thought I was better than all of you, and I didn't think I needed you. And, when you finally get into the steps, it's a really wonderfully effective defense to keep you distant and walled off from everybody if you think you're better than them. And really what it's defending against is that I thought I was worse. And I thought I was lower and smaller, and the me that thinks I'm going to get hooked off the stage, right? That's the me that I'm defending against. The scared little girl who really just desperately wants you to like me, because I don't even like myself. And so I need you to like me. But if I can't have you like me, well, then I'm just going to judge you all. And so I did that. And yet, when I came home the next day, because inevitably the dean did not think me going to a meeting was enough to keep me in school. And I was really there because I thought if I told the dean the next day I was going to AA, they wouldn't kick me out. I'm a really good manipulator. So I share all this with you and this kind of whole story of how I got here because I had no idea the gift that I was going to get when I did the next hardest thing, which was I went to a meeting the next night. And I went because you guys were nice to me. That's it. If I stayed home that night, my parents were just going to scowl at me and be pissed off, and here I am, home from college again. And so I went to another meeting, and somebody I knew from high school was there. And they dragged me to meetings for the next week. And then I went to a rehab that forced me to go to meetings. And I did all of this pretty blindly. I'm a good student, I'll do what you tell me to do, mostly because I want it to look good, not because I actually believe in it, and then I think you'll get off my back if I just do what you tell me to do for a little while. But I did it all without really understanding alcoholism. And I didn't really understand that not only did I belong here, but the most important thing that my husband said to me when I told him this funny story about I love that I got asked to speak, but I'm pretty sure they're going to hook me off the stage 10 minutes in, was he said, yeah, I get that same feeling before I go up and speak too. And that was the entry point into, it was just the crack in the door. When someone would share something at a meeting that connected with me, and then somebody else would share something that sounded just like that, and all of a sudden, I wasn't alone anymore. And I had felt so alone in my head, in my experience in the world. I had felt so separate and so scared and so confused, and I managed that by pretending I didn't need anybody and that I was perfect and that I had it all together. There was no room for me to consider that other people felt the way I felt, other people dealt with what I dealt with, and thank goodness, because God generally speaks to me through you guys. All I have to do is say what I'm thinking out loud, and already it sounds way more nuts when I say it. And then I get some really wonderful responses from the people in my life that are sober. And as a very, very good friend of mine, Jim, says, when cooler heads prevail. And the cooler head is usually not mine. It's usually another member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I stuck around here long enough to start to realize that I liked being here. I don't know that I totally bought that I was an alcoholic, but I liked being here, and some of the women said things that made sense to me. And I got a sponsor, and she was big on service, and she was big on diners and cheeseburgers and bowling. So I was the greeter. I'm a wonderful greeter because I'm incredibly social, and I'm generally pretty happy. And so I did really well as the greeter. I was going to be the best greeter you'd ever met. And then when I was the coffee maker, I was going to be the best coffee maker you ever had. And by the way, you want to get known in AA, don't make good coffee, make bad coffee. Make bad coffee, everyone knows you. Make good coffee, no one knows who you are. I learned this pretty early on. I make terrible coffee. 19 years later, I make good coffee. We drink a lot of coffee in my house right now. My coffee is definitely better than my husband's. I've got the ratio down. But it was fun. I was 22. I was hanging out with a bunch of young people. I wasn't talking big book. I wasn't talking steps. I wasn't talking God. I was reconnected to a world where people were having fun and laughing, and we were having a good time, and I felt a part of for the first time. Maybe for the first time ever. But at 2 years sober, I was driving home from work, and I had this thought, I really wish my car would just crash into a tree. And I thought, well, that's weird because like I'm sober. So like, how come I'm so miserable still? You know, how come I feel like dying inside every day? I don't want to kill myself, but I feel like dying inside. And I'm not drinking, so what is going on? And that's what I mean when I say I almost caught alcoholism here. Because I didn't really understand that the alcohol and the food and the inappropriate relationships with guys and whatever else I used, I mean, we can add shopping, I can go down a long list. That was really just a symptom of a much bigger problem. And that problem was this sort of soul sickness. Someone called it a spiritual tapeworm, you know, because it eats you from the inside out. And I just didn't know that I had that. And I didn't know till I wasn't drinking anymore, and the wreckage of my life was no longer there. I walked in, step one, powerless over alcohol? No. I can go like weeks without drinking. I'm not powerless over alcohol. Life unmanageable? Yes. Incredibly unmanageable. There was nothing functional about the way I was living. I hadn't lost a lot yet because I was young, but it didn't matter. You know, all you had to do was raise the bottom, like it talks about in step one, that sometimes we have to raise the bottom for the young people so they don't have to have the experience. I caught the nip of the ringer. I absolutely did with my drinking. But my alcoholism took me to worse, dark, scarier places. When you take booze away from me and I don't have a solution, I'm really in a dangerous spot. And I only know this because I'm such a good alcoholic that when I finally figure out that this solution, God, steps, sponsorship, all of it will work, I will do it, get my life together, and then I will have this insane delusion that like, I did this. And I don't really need you guys. And I've done that once between year 5 and 8. I moved to New York City. I was terrified to tell people that I was new. I didn't get reconnected to a group. I hid in the 400-person mass that is the Atlantic group. I just hid there. I didn't really get involved. And I would sit in my psychiatrist's office and be like, hey, it doesn't work. See, I'm still anxious. I'm still miserable, blah, blah, blah. But really what happened was I stopped doing what I learned at year 2 when I had that thought, why do I want to die? I heard a speaker not too long after that talk about a similar experience, feeling worse in sobriety, and that she didn't live that way anymore. And I just started to chase her. And she sat down and she read me the big book, and it was awkward and it was weird, and I was like, I have more degrees than you, so you're reading to me, I don't really understand it. But the pivotal moment wasn't actually in any of the chapters about step 1 and step 2. I could tell you that I was an alcoholic and that my drinking was problematic. I could get with this idea that maybe something outside of me would help because I'd been sober for 2 years and my life didn't look nearly as bad as it had looked prior. So I had sort of a rudimentary sure. When she read the part in the book about the actor in step 3, and then she asked me to read it back to her in the first person. And I had to sit there and talk about, I am the one who thinks they can wrest satisfaction out of this world if they only manage it well. I will sometimes be incredibly nice and sometimes not so nice in service of getting what I need. It was like a thunderbolt for me. More so than when I started to understand about the allergy, about what happens when I put alcohol in my body and how I really can't stop once I start, or even the mental twist that makes me be convinced that next time will be different. I do this today in my life about this strange mental twist that next time it will be different, I won't drink the same way, I'll manage it better. There is a coffee shop by my house that has a drive-through. It will remain nameless. I go to it. Every time I think it's the drive-through, it's going to be fast, and every time I sit there for 13 minutes waiting for my cup of coffee. I did it tonight on my way here, and it is literally the definition of insanity because I am convinced that this time they will not make me wait, and every time they make me wait. And so it's sort of like a very safe version of what I would do with the booze and the food and everything else, that there was this illusion that somehow I was going to figure it out, I was going to beat the game, I was going to be the one who figured out the thing that nobody else could, which was that I was going to control it, I was going to enjoy it, And then the kicker for me was that because I figured it out, this would be the thing that everything in my life would fall into place. Bad stuff wouldn't happen. I wouldn't have to deal with hard feelings. None of those things would happen if I'm just perfect enough at it. And while that stuff resonated with me and it got me to stay here, it was when I really had to look at this idea that I need to control everything, that it is really always about me needing to be in charge, because I am terrified. I'm terrified of letting go of that. You know, they talk about what it is, fear being like the evil and corrosive thread through the fabric of our existence. I am a fearful person. I am a fearful person today. I am not a fearful person that treats my fear with alcohol and drugs anymore. I can acknowledge my fear. I notice when it shows up, and I have to acknowledge how usually off the wall the thought is. So I have a kid, he's 4.5. I'm sorry, I have a lot of parenting stories. I'm really in it. You're lucky we're not talking about diapers and formula. But my son is 4.5, and he is an early riser, like 4:30 a.m. a few years ago early. We are at 6:37 a.m. This is a miracle, by the way. I am not waking up before the birds. And I guess like 2 months ago, he slept till 8:15. And this is my alcoholism, even 19 years later. I looked at the clock, and my first thought was, he's dead. He died overnight. Like, that absolutely is what happened. He died. And then the next thought is, do I go up there and check? Because then, I'll realize he's not dead. He's just sleeping, and I won't be anxious anymore. But I'll wake him up. And I want him to stay asleep, because at that point, my twin boys were like 6 weeks old, and the nights were rough. So any moments of peace that we got were really good. But that's it. Like, my default is that I think worst case scenario, I am terrified of you. You are all judging me. I am this very small, insignificant person who can't do anything right. And therefore, I have to do everything right to avoid ever feeling that way. So when my sponsor and I read about the actor, which I for years called the director, because there's my ego, right? It's not that I'm an actor, I'm the director. I'm actually in charge of it all. It really hit me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is me. And once I could say, this is me, you didn't have to convince me to do anything anymore. I became incredibly willing in a way that I couldn't have even anticipated willingness. And, I didn't fly through step 4 because, well, it's step 4 and it's hard. But I also found out in step 4 that my people-pleasing nature is really to avoid dealing with how incredibly angry I am. I am a very angry lady. And I will tell you that years later, in a lot of psychotherapy, I can now really see how angry I have always been, and how there was never any room to even consider that maybe some of the anger was legitimate, but it is not a healthy place for me to hang out in anger. I had some justifiable anger stuff happen the other week with health insurance and a PT place for my son, and oh my goodness, I can get high on anger. I can get high on it. I can get self-righteous. I can get in your face. I can really take anger to another level. And instead of learning to deal with my anger like a reasonable, rational human being, I can become incredibly irrational, unreasonable, and out of control. And so for me, step 4 was the first place that I had to actually realize, yeah, you're angry, and you're human, and you have all these feelings. And by the way, other people didn't all hurt you. You stepped on a lot of toes. And that is a painful pill to swallow when you've spent your life trying to please everybody else and be perfect. Because all that does is breed this deep resentment about not being seen and people not treating you the way you think you deserve to be treated. And it sets up a wonderful dynamic for me to never, ever, ever let any of you really get to know me. And so once I actually sat down with another woman and shared my story with her and read my 4th step to her, and she again was like, yeah, me too. Here's what I felt that reconnection, it made it a lot easier to keep going forward. And I'm not going to take you point by point through the rest of my step work, but I will tell you that I needed to go through the steps in order. I couldn't make amends before I really understood how I had harmed others, and the harms that I did were not the things that I often thought I did. You know, the hardest part about some of the amends process was telling people this experience of, you know, how I had harmed them, and then asking them what I missed, and then hearing that what the real harm was how much I had stolen from them emotionally. I had roommates in college that were terrified I was going to kill myself, and they thought it was somehow their fault that they hadn't stepped in sooner. I could not begin to appreciate what that must have been like for them until I sat down with them and talked to them about it, and I heard how incredibly painful it was to be around me. And when you start hearing the same thing from people all around you, it becomes incredibly hard to deny that that's who you are. And I had spent my whole life being this perfect version, right? I'm getting dressed tonight and I'm like, oh, what am I gonna wear? And I'm going through all, it's all about how does it look, you know, because there is still some part of me that struggles with what are you guys gonna think of me? Am I put together enough to make the cut? But really, underneath it, I was operating in this way to almost pretend, because I thought if you knew me, you wouldn't like me. And my roommates didn't need me to be perfect, but they were terrified. And I can't imagine how hard that is at 22 years old to live with someone who you are watching actively destroy themselves. And I was really good at self-destruction. So when I got to 12 and my sponsor said, it's time for you to start sponsoring other women, first of all, I loved the moment when I got to put my name on the book for the 90-day mark. It was like a huge deal for me, even though I didn't really think I was an alcoholic. I loved that I could write my name and number on that book. And so then it felt, when I got to 12, a little bit similar. Like I had done this thing and I had punched my card and now I'm really in the club. And, you know, I kind of operated in life as like this race of like needing to win it, needing to check it off, needing to get to this next thing. And if that's really all sponsorship was, just this place to check a box and, I don't know, move me to the next level because now I can sponsor you or whatever my ego needs to hear, I'd have really missed the joy of sponsorship. I was driving here tonight. My drive was like an hour and 40 minutes, and I spent 50 of those minutes on the phone with a woman I used to sponsor. She's still sober, but she's not really active in AA anymore. She happens to have twin sons, so we've reconnected. And it's such a gift to be able to listen to someone and have them share their life with you, and to struggle with someone, and to get to see the successes in life with someone. And AA lets me walk with you guys. Not above, not below, but right alongside. And my sponsor, I've had three actually sponsors over the years. My current sponsor I've been with for about 11 years. My sponsor before her had relapsed, and it was devastating because she was the woman who lit me on fire. And she literally did. You know, we light each other on fire. This isn't like a fire just gets lit. We light each other on fire. And to be given that candle to light someone else on fire, I mean, that's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege to have someone ask you to be in their life in that intimate of a way, to be that connected with. And I was on the phone with this woman as we're driving here, and she's just struggling. She's a new mom, she has twins, there's medical issues, and I always thought that if I figured out how to do life, I wouldn't have to deal with anything hard. And like, that's not real, but like, that's a very childlike belief, and that's the belief that got me to drinking, because somehow I was doing something wrong if life was still hard. And that's really just a setup for failure. And so to be able to share with her some of the hards, and to have the vantage point of being on the other side when she's so in them, I think is a blessing that we get in AA that often gets missed outside. You know, I talk to people who, I'm a therapist for a living, by the way. I ended up doing this thing that, you know, it ended up being my livelihood, and it wasn't intentional, and I actually don't really treat a lot of us. So it's really fascinating to see how the mind of people that aren't alcoholic works, because it's so quite different than the way my mind works. And I won't speak for anyone else, but I will say, you know, there is something really beautiful that happens here. There's an authenticity that I experience when I say something and someone nods their head, or someone laughs alongside me when I say, like, well, I really thought my kid was dead at 8:15 in the morning, and you guys laugh, but my mother looks at me like I have 6 heads. She's like, what are you, what? She just doesn't get it. She can't get it, and that's okay. It took a long time for me to accept that too. That, like, some people just don't get it, and that's all right. And that's not a knock on me or them. Like, they're just not gonna get it. But because I'm sober, I reap the benefits of that relationship in a way that I could never even see when I was actively using, and when I was in recovery and I wasn't really working the steps. I was like working them the way I wanted to work them. And without fail, when I come here and I do what the people before me did, when I sit back and allow myself to acknowledge that the generosity and kindness of these giants in my life, life gets a lot simpler. It doesn't get easier, it gets simpler though. Because AA just tells me what to do. It really does. Like, no one tells me what to do here, but AA gives me a blueprint for how to deal with things. And in sponsoring other women, not only do I get to, like, pass that light on to them, it comes back to me in spades. You know, there's nothing more wonderful than staying here to watch other people recover, to not be in that seemingly hopeless state of mind, to have clarity of thought, to rebuild their lives, to go through really hard stuff and not get drunk over it. And, like, this is still about not drinking 19 years in. You know, I don't think about drinking often, but last December I got some bad news. It was the day after Christmas, and I was home by myself. I called my husband, I shared the news with him. He was equally upset, and I sat down to have lunch, and the thought that a glass of wine would be nice floated right in. And luckily, I'm still entrenched enough in AA to catch that thought when it shows up and not automatically believe it. And that's the danger of this disease. My disease lies to me in my own voice, and it lies to me in ways that, when I am not guarded and not connected with God, makes sense, which is like that unguarded moment, you know, that we talk about. And so in that moment, I was able to say, like, well, wow, that's a really ludicrous thought, because that's not going to make this better right now. In fact, it's going to make it a whole lot worse. To be able to recognize that is only a gift that happens when I'm actively doing this. Precede like 2 years, and I am in a training program for my job, and so I was in my own psychoanalysis 2 times a week, and I had the thought that, like, maybe I didn't need AA anymore and I just needed therapy. And I bought that thought hook, line, and sinker for like a month. And then I brought it to therapy, and my therapist said, why would you stop doing the one thing you've done consistently that has given you such a wonderful life? And I was like, that thought really is, that's sideways. Like, that doesn't make sense. But it's so easy to believe it if I don't stay here and I don't share it with you. So I think, you know, I've got about 10 minutes left, and I have to tell you that when I got sober, I really thought it just was going to be about stopping the chaos. And initially that's what it was. You know, if I'm not getting drunk, I'm not ending up in hospitals and getting DWIs and disappointing my parents and doing all the things that I was doing and destroying relationships. I'm not doing that. But internally, I was still really struggling. And that's why I say, you know, I really began to understand and believe I was an alcoholic in sobriety, because I have to see what happens to me when I'm not drinking to really understand the true malady of my disease. You know, it says restless, irritable, and discontent in the book. I think my baseline state is anxious, angry, and depressed. You wouldn't know that looking at me. I seem incredibly friendly. I'm very social, but internally never matched what I would show the world. And I had to appreciate how incredibly destructive I can be in service of avoiding those feelings. And that's what alcohol did. Alcohol gave me an escape from those feelings, but it always did it in a way that was destructive to me and destructive to those around me. And so I am someone who's a big believer of outside help. I think it's in addition to, not instead of. And I think it's a wonderful thing when you can expand your life. And that's what 11 became for me. You know, this whole thing about God and a relationship with God. My first sponsor believed in like Mother Nature and earth and trees, and she was not a big God person. She didn't even use the word, but she was very spiritual. And it was easier for me to have a sponsor like that than to be confronted with this idea of God, you know, and what God meant. And I remember at some point writing down what I wanted my God to be, which seems very egotistical now when I look back on that, what I want my God to be, right? And what I know is that the longer I'm sober, the less I know God. And that's a really cool thought today, but it would have been a terrifying thought in early sobriety. Because what I do understand about my relationship with my higher power that I choose to call God is that God works in ways I can't understand, and only when I look for it. I can come up with a lot of reasons why that person from high school was at the meeting, or I listened to my mom that day, and none of them, and I can come up with a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with something bigger than me. But when I really step back and I think about my higher power and what makes sense, the only explanation I can come up with is that something outside of me was at play that day, because I behaved in a way that was outside of my normal state. And it was an entire change of how I behaved the minute before that and the minute after that. And for me, that is to know God. To be able to understand that if I am open to the experience, something bigger than me can work through me and with me to connect me with you, and to allow me to handle situations in ways that make no sense, is baffling, exciting, and terrifying. My husband and I have a disagreement about whether or not we should be waking our twins up every 3 or 4 hours at night still to feed, up to a certain time at night. I think we should wait till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then we can let them sleep as long as they want, because I want them sleeping at night and not during the day. Whatever. I can come up with a lot of reasons for this. My husband, 12 weeks in, does not always do that. So when I come down the next morning and I look at the logs and I see that he has not followed my rules, I have a big reaction to it. A month ago, that reaction ended in me using some expletives and being very angry. The other week when this happened, I put myself in timeout in our bedroom with my cup of coffee and realized that I was going to sit there and stew and get angrier. So I got in the car, went for a drive, called another alcoholic, and came back with my head screwed on straight, and we were able to have a rational, sane conversation. The only difference in that 1 month period, I'm sleeping a little more, by the way, but I've spoken at a few meetings. We started leading a Saturday night meeting that has gotten me to another meeting regularly, in addition to the 7 a.m. meeting that I get to, and I'm talking more to sponsees. This is not me. This is a function of AA and God working in my life, because I do what I'm told here. And sometimes I wish when I do these speaks, because I've gotten to come up and do 1 hour speaks a number of times, I wish I was like the person who could just quote the big book or tell you guys the stories that make you, like, I wish I was that person. But what I am, and what I know to be true, and what I know to be my story, is that I am a woman at 19 years sober that still struggles. And I still struggle in a way that I can talk to you about, and I don't drink over it anymore. And so, yeah, like, I wonder about whether I should wash my hair before a meeting, because what are you guys going to think of me if I have wet hair on Zoom, right? Like, am I going to look good enough? And it's silly, but at least I can talk to you about it today, because this is how my alcoholism works. It will get me to take the shower, not go to the meeting, and then not go the next day because nothing bad happened when I didn't go. And then I don't have to call my sponsor tonight. And all of a sudden, we're like 6 feet down the road, and I haven't been to a meeting in 3 weeks. And I'm acting a little bit more itchy. That's a nice word I'll use for it. And I can do one of two things, you know. I can do with what works. I can get back to meetings and my sponsor and the steps and my prayer life, and I can slow down, and I can think about things, and I can ask God for help, or I can keep trying to run that show like the actor who thinks they're the director. And like, when I run the show, it works for a while, which fuels the lie. But inevitably it stops working. And that's always what I got drunk over in the past, when it stopped working. And Today, I know the easier, softer way is when I get out of my own way. And today, I know that AA has given me a life that I couldn't even dare to consider. They said a life beyond your wildest dreams. The other thing about maybe why I wouldn't have come to this meeting when I was newly sober is you guys were way too happy. I'm a very happy person on the outside, but internally I'm not. So you guys were way too happy for me in the beginning, probably. Because when you would say a life beyond my wildest dreams, I had some, thoughts on that wouldn't be appropriate to share from the podium. And it's not a life beyond my wildest dreams, it's a life. Forget dreams, it's a life. It's an actual functional life. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter to my parents who do really wacky stuff and disappoint me still, and I don't scream at them anymore about it because I realize that doesn't get us anywhere. And they have their own path, and it's not mine. I'm a friend. And I'm a member of AA. And that's one of the greatest gifts I ever got, was just to be a member of AA. You don't need me to be in charge of it. You don't need me to fix it. You also don't need me to be the spokesperson for why it doesn't work. I just need to show up and do my job here. And when I do that, I reap the benefits and dividends. And when I was driving down here, I was like, there's all these things I'm going to say, and I have all this stuff about all this great opines that are supposed to come out of me, that I'm supposed to dazzle you all with. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, what I've learned, that what works and what I can leave you with as we get ready to close in the next minute or two, is that this is all about connection. It's about connection to my higher power, which I get through you guys. It's about connection to myself and starting to understand who I am and how I operate, and that my brain works in ways that ultimately at times can be incredibly self-destructive to those around me and myself, and that I can experience the greatest joy and the greatest pain, and I don't have to use substances to manage that ever again if I don't want to. And for today, that works. I do know that I only get this when I show up. And I don't just show up to see what happens to people that don't show up anymore. I show up because when I stick around here, I see the coolest stuff happen. I had a sponsee who I started sponsoring a month before her mom died of an overdose. And her sister was already sober, and so she came in and she had some time, and people come to find me as a sponsor when they have blurry boundaries with their sponsors, and I have good boundaries, so then they come and find me. And I started working with her a month before her mom passed away. And not only did I watch these two women walk through that with grace and dignity, I watched AA show up for them in a way that I have never seen, ever, anywhere else. You want to see the power of AA? Watch somebody have something bad happen to them here. We show up for each other in ways that I can't describe, I can't understand, and all I know is I'm proud to be a part of. And I don't want to hand that back over just because life got really good. I know where the women go in the years between 10 and 20. We get married, we have kids, and it takes a back seat. And this is the best show in town. So I'm not ready to hand it back or miss it. And I'm really grateful that you guys gave me the opportunity to come up here and talk. I honestly have no idea what I said because I'm a little befogged and sleep deprived. But I hope I brought a typical AA message and that somebody walks away with something. So thanks.
My name's Nick, I'm an alcoholic. Let's have another round of applause for Jenica. We're all so happy that you came. Anyway, it's customary for us to form a line and thank our speaker. They come here at their own time and expense. We could always use some help cleaning up. All the chairs will stay at the tables as they were there, and all the chairs will go on the racks that were there. And if you care to join us, we'll close with the Lord's Prayer. moment of silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread,